All right, today is August the 5th in 2025, and my guest is Sondre Rasch, the founder and CEO of SafetyWing, a health insurance for digital nomads. Very excited to have Sondre on today. I'm a user of SafetyWing, as are many people here in Prosper, where I'm at. Sondre has been following the space for a while in Prosper. We tried two times to come, but it didn't work out yet. But many of his ideas or thoughts align very much with ideas around the network state, alternative jurisdictions, becoming sovereign individuals through digital nomadism, having options, be insured. When you are pursuing different options, having like a global social safety net and things like that. So we're going to hear all about that. And also, Sondre has a lot to say about sort of the legal and regulatory setup that enabled him to succeed with the company. So this is going to be very interesting for regular listeners on this podcast. But first of all, Sondre, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nicholas. Really looking forward to the chat.
Sure.
Very,
So great. Yeah, me too. So tell us a bit about SafetyWing and then your journey to founding it.
Mhm.
How big is it right now? It's a big, it's a big company right now, right?
Yeah. Still kind of early days. I mean, we're a couple hundred employees. We have $50 million revenue. That's two numbers or almost 50.
Going towards
But
unicorn, right?
yeah, yeah, no, for sure, we're gonna get there eventually. We are, but we still have a lot ahead of us in terms of product development. While we are now quite experienced, and I think we've been able to build some good, some bordering up on great health insurance experiences. I think it's about to become a lot better. So I'm very excited about the future. I mean, we're trying to build a global social safety net. Briefly on me, I I grew up a little bit on the internet, but then I had a detour where I was interested in policy and politics. So studied economics, worked as a policy advisor. Kind of had a bit of almost like an econ job, but I didn't have a PhD in the Norwegian government. So people would give me like a kind of high level thing, like reform higher education, and it's like fill it with some input, and then I would sort of we would host conferences, we would do this like crowdsourcing, and then we would often have like a kind of expert panel and then try to gather all these ideas into this like white paper that was the basis for a policy proposal. That was a great job. But I also discovered the kind of problem with government and innovation there, which is that it's a big organization and it's slow, very slow. And I just thought, since I grew up a lot on the internet, I just thought, oh, like there is this, I think a tsunami. It's still ahead. Like people are not aware how the internet's a bigger deal than it seems like, which is strange when it's so present. But it's even larger, I think, in its impact than people currently realize. And and so I eventually left that world to found first Superside and now SafeTwing.
Great. Yeah, it's a bit of a similar journey. I also used to work in policy. I was in Washington, D.C. at AEI and at CSIS. And I was kind of realizing, yeah, many of these papers that we wrote, people didn't even like read it, nor did it lead to any meaningful impact. Right. And then I also eventually discovered technology and entrepreneurship, and I realized this is the way to actually change things. You need to build something different or something better that can replace some of these existing organizations and institutions. Right. There's very little chance that you can actually reform many of these structures. For a while, I did not think that government was something that you could change or where you could build an alternative, but that's where we're at now, and it's enabling lots of other things.
Mhm.
But I'm curious, how did you specifically get into insurance? Why was that kind of something that intrigued you and that you became obsessed with?
That was more for me a way to the goal than the sort of primary object of interest. Although I certainly have a sort of general systems oriented mind, like my sort of for since I was like 18, one of my pastimes is like watching infrastructure projects being built, and I will get like progress photos. So that's just like what I'm interested in my head. Um, so in that sense, there is something to be interested in insurance. But no, I wanted to make the global social safety net, and insurance is that's just the name for that in private sphere, insurance or savings, uh, and uh, and so that's how I got into it and learned it. Um, yeah,
Great. Yeah, I'm also curious. So, what do you mean by social safety net, and how do you plan to achieve that?
global social safety net uh, is the core idea is just what the social safety net in Norway, but much better and kind of with a great user experience available globally on the internet as a membership.
Great. And yeah, it basically the welfare state in a way is insurance, right? It's just insurance run by the state, kind of with no competitors, right? So
Yes.
often many of the things that states do have already been done on the private market, and it actually often crowds out other existing solutions. So how did you get to, especially like the digital nomad space, or realize that there was kind of an angle or a solution that was needed?
Well, I mean, I discovered digital nomadism in 2012, 2014, and it was incredibly appealing. The logic of it. And I think Peter Levels was already there. I'd read Tim Ferriss's book. I mean, those are some of the key. But I mean, it's just such a discovery back then. I'm so happy for the current generation of young people that they have this option. But yeah, it's this ultimate exit uh, hatch, right? Where you can leave your sort of uh, rat race where you are in a big city in a kind of crappy job and paying all your income in rent, and then you can instead shop cities and go to this like high quality of life, low cost city, uh, and get an online income. Online freelancing was the only thing that now you can even have a remote job. But back then it was online freelancing, work 20% on that. And then I basically have the whole week off to, for me, the creative project, which would be startup. But I think for other people, it could be other creative projects. I mean, it's just an unbelievable opportunity while also living, I think, a great life and going on this sort of adventure of my life. I mean, something I certainly appreciate, traveling adventure. Um, I mean, it's just perfect. I can't believe how great digital nomad is.
Yeah, I've been a digital nomad for 2.5 years myself until I roughly settled in Prosper. I was still traveling a lot. It is really hard to describe how much it changes you, and how much you also start realizing how much more you can design your life compared to what you did before. Like, most people grow up kind of as mono citizens in one country. They have their bank account, their insurance, their business, their family, live in one place. And when you start going around to other places, you're realizing that you can just get a better deal by like diversifying and putting many of these things in like different baskets in different places around the world, and sort of optimize your life this way. But when you do that, you need insurance, right? It's often very much tied to the local healthcare systems. So it's something that I realized once I started doing it. Fortunately, I had a German insurance that was covering that case, but only for 5 years, right? So basically from now on, or from like the last half year on, there would be very hard for me to get other insurance. Now I have SafetyWing. Um, how were you able kind of to decouple insurance from these many different national systems and build it so it was accessible to nomads?
Mhm. So the way, thankfully, there was within health a walked up um, system that we could adopt and learn from. It was made for a different use case, not for sort of nomads or internet economy, but for expats. So expats is they're overlapping problems, but it's a very different social sphere, right? It's Shell oil employees placed in Kuwait for 5 years or something. And so whole companies had been built on this domain, and they all had a similar-ish setup, which was this idea of essentially you have one footprint. So you don't try to get insurance company license in every country in the world, which would be a prohibitive regulatory barrier to entry for a startup before going to market. But you sort of you choose one central location, and it's one of those jurisdictions that specialize in hosting insurance companies. And then you have to be aware of all the countries' regulations, though, and they kind of fit into 3 buckets. So there are some countries where this sort of international, like buying a foreign, essentially insurance products, is not allowed. That actually includes the US. You can buy travel medical, though. That is an exception in all the countries, because obviously people use that when traveling. But not for home covering health insurance. In the US, Canada, Singapore, there's a few countries where even UAE is difficult. But then there is a lot of countries where it is allowed, but you have to adhere to local rules. That's another like 30, 40. And then there's a lot of countries where it's like, that's just allowed. So you can just have international health insurance that covers you in that country. And legally speaking, what's happening is that you're kind of going to that country, the origin country, and buying that product. So, and this is a similar thing that happened with the sort of digital product on the internet. There was a lot of lawsuits in the 2000s, like, how are we going to do this? What's happening here when you're buying an online digital product? And the kind of conclusion was, well, you're kind of going to where the server started becoming important. I don't know if you remember that, but like, you're going there and you're buying it there. And I think that's what you need to, that's the equilibrium you need to end up at. But this is still, but this had established in a different way in insurance. So that's how you do it. You establish it in one place, you have to kind of keep track of the rules. There are some countries you have to exclude, some where you have to pay attention to and adhere to local rules. And there are some where it's just allowed for them. So for we have a couple of different products. For the travel medical product,
That's right.
there the
And-
rule is you just
But
can't
you
have
are
home
able
country
to
coverage
have
beyond a
coverage
certain
in the
time.
US now, right? Some of these countries.
Uh, yes, but they can then have it as a subscription and perpetually. And if they're a foreigner in the US, they can do that. But an American,
So Americans can use it to travel, but they can't use it
Yeah.
in their own country.
so that's our Nomad Essential thing. And then you have Nomad Complete. That's a regular health insurance with home country coverage. So in most countries, you can then,
So
except
I,
the
as a
US and a few
German,
others,
with
you
I
can
have, I can get
be from that country, use it as your main health insurance, private health insurance in that country and abroad. Less countries covered. Still mostly everybody though, but there's another batch of countries where you can't do that in. And then we have Nomad Citizen, which is actually just this new product coming out. This is a first step in the sort of internet country direction. But that's built on the kind of travel medical chassis, but we're just taking it to the extremes. It's just an extremely high coverage product that also covers income protection, like disability, unemployment, etc. But the way we get that into the kind of travel medical category is that you need to intend to, the first year you use it, only the first year, you need to intend to be abroad more than 6 months. Because we figured out we can actually stretch that home country definition up to 6 months and still kind of have home country coverage for those remaining 6 months.
Interesting. And what's these?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
probably then have like different legal entities in different jurisdictions.
In the United States, there are several.
What are kind of the insurance domiciles?
But Bermuda is definitely
Like
like a top
Bermuda,
domicile
Vermont,
for
the United
insurance
States,
entities.
places like that, right?
We are in Puerto Rico actually for our main carrier, but we were this close to being in Bermuda. Why Puerto Rico? They also are trying to kind of specialize, and they have this added benefit that it's much easier to get into the US. So it could work as a global base and potentially as the beginning of a US base as well. And we are launching remote health in the US now, but that's actually in October. But that is a US native one, because we've just tried so many ways to get the kind of international one to work from the US, and we figured out we just got to have a US base that then has global coverage. So it's a slightly different product for the US startups who want their local people covered. It's so regulated in the US. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do think I know
So besides the legal and
we
regulatory
knew that there
setup,
were
what
regulatory
were kind
barriers
of
to
the
entry
biggest
in the products we were making,
obstacles or
and
bottlenecks
we
that
were
you were
aware of
facing
that,
that you
and
might have
we
been
developed our
struggling?
strategy with that in mind. And I'm very glad we did. That was a key part. And throughout the years, I've also had many friends who are founders who tried to start insurance startups, and I've seen so many of them not get to market, essentially not overcoming the regulatory barrier. Although, there's always some specifics to a particular story. So I've also realized that our ability to overcome those is actually a key competitive advantage. And I'm also finding, like, with remote health, we're so many years in, we don't have like direct venture funded competitors, but I have seen them trying. Like, I've seen them announce, launch, narrow, and then stop. So, I've seen it many times, and I think here there's a couple of things. Like, one was my particular background of like being in government a little bit. I think that helped. My co-founder, so I have two, Sarah's a programmer, Hans, who's a lawyer, but he's a creative lawyer. So a lot of lawyers, it's more like they're just they're more like kind of low openness, high conscientiousness. Is this allowed? Uh, and they see so many people fall for that. Like, can we do that? No. Okay, but that's not gonna work. So you just gotta, like, with this. I remember with this, to give one example here of how we overcome a particular one. One is we wanted to have like an ambassador program, and we had seen other insurance companies have something like that, so we knew it was possible in the US. But our lawyers and our insurance companies lawyers, back then we didn't have our own carrier. They just said, no, you can't do that because you need an agent license to sell insurance or a broker license to sell insurance. And so I think across, I don't know, 15 to 20 meetings, every time we would have another meeting, I would have a new proposal. How about so and so? How about so and so? And they would often explain to me, like, over an hour, like, poor you, how can you be so like, I know so little. And one day I had this one, and I remember it so well. The conversation was like this. I was like, I had this other idea, and I was like, can you do like, can you do internet marketing, like, in insurance? And they're like, yeah, you can do that. Click. Can you do like play pay per click? Yeah, you can do pay per click. So, like, can you do even like potential like pay per sale? And like, and they're like, yeah, you can do. And they're like, that's what this is. And they're like, well, should have said that from the beginning. Like, then you need to write that into the contract. And I'm like, you thought that was some hard constraint? I would never change the contract. But that is often an assumption built in, right? Which is like, they're operating in these like different boxes. And so many lawyers think that when you mean creative, what you mean is breaking the law or like bending the law, or essentially breaking the law. And that's the only thing. It's just, but no, there are, and especially internationally, there are many different jurisdictions. There are many different potential buckets. The law is always outdated. Um, the law is always made for a different use case. And there's always a case to be made that you're this type of species and not that. And turns out that type of species is in line with the user experience goals that we have, which we're always focused on. We want a particular user experience to the end user, a particular simplicity in the product. That was a main thing we were working on. So yeah, so that's a example from the real life.
Amazing. This is such a stranded technologies conversation. right? Sort of the internet running up against all these like paper rules that were made kind of in the pre-internet era, and then sort of in creative ways, not like breaking the rules necessarily, but kind of trying to find ways to work with them, to work with the things that are undefined, and sort of even sometimes, in my case, even changing the rules. Like for my business, now we've been working on passing a new bill in a US state, right? So even that works. And I think that's especially attainable now for founders, especially with AI, right? So you can just get much more quickly to like a basis of knowledge that you need to understand these rules and all these jurisdictions, right? In ways that really wasn't possible before. There was like so many expensive
Yeah.
lawyer hours that we otherwise need. So I think this conversation really is like a core, some points at like a really core skill set for an internet entrepreneur in our era and just like the network state space. But I'm also curious, what are kind of other barriers to building insurance, right? Because you need to work with a lot of institutional players as well, like reinsurance, for example, or how do you set up a network of providers and things like that? And I'm particularly interested in the question, by the way, because we're also looking like
No,
continues is very key to Prospera.
I'll tell you.
And
So
I'm also
if
thinking,
you or
how
someone is
can
thinking
I
about doing
like
an
set up
insurance
like a life
startup,
insurance thing for my business that I
so
give as a service to people. So I'm curious, what are kind of the
briefly, how did we do it? Just that's worth mentioning out of the gate, because we knew what we wanted. We knew it was hard in the right way. Like we had a good guess about what would be difficult about getting the product to market. And I remember we had this ideation session, which is and we wrote down 70 different ways, and we just did them all in parallel, which was my sort of go-to method for problem solving back in the day. And then one of them worked, which was such an unlikely one, which was that I posted this Upwork ad, and I just like they would have wanted, like, they were like, we're going to build a global social safety net country on the internet. Can you help us do it? And this guy responded, and he was the one that led us in contact with this company that became our first insurance partner, Tokyo Marine. And they had a similar product, and this guy being in the middle and being incentivized, helped kind of translate between us. And through a long series of negotiation and changes, we landed on something that was close to the product we had designed. Okay, what can we? And that was our first time. Yeah. For the connection. Yeah.
wait, so you challenge it?
Okay, so I should say, like, there are so many
Right,
other
17
more
different
plausible
ways
things
to
we
find
tried.
one.
The most dangerous of them is that a lot of these insurance companies have like innovation labs. Oh my gosh, these are death traps for startups. So, and we wasted a lot of time with them, and I've seen so many other companies literally just die, like run out of money, while in a very encouraging conversation with, Munich Re Innovation Labs, just to name drop one particularly wasteful one. Yeah, so what they do, they set out these innovation labs, but they're kind of basically comms people. Like, they don't have much authority. So it's like, in the end, they can just send an intro to someone, and you have all the same problems remaining after you went through their entire process. And what is the fundamental problem? It is that a lot of startup obviously are novel, so they imagine that they don't fit an existing category. And so they want to make that insurance product. But the problem is, it's very hard to make new categories because the categories are regulated and the companies are conservative. So, but they're also intrigued, and so they kind of pull you along until you run out of money. But a much more plausible way to work is that you find an existing category and stretch it. It's amazing how far you can stretch an existing category. Like, our initial idea totally worked, which was, hey, travel insurance exists. And we knew that was like short-term, episodic, etc. But like, clearly that's possible for international health. Can we just do that and just make it a full health insurance and just a subscription you can have forever. That's a global health insurance. And turns out kind of, yeah, you can do that. So it's, and that's much easier than making a new product category. And so I think this is a really important lesson. Um, uh, Yeah, we didn't know we needed an insurance partner, so that was just one of the ways to the goal. But it turned out to be really important. And yeah, so the other things you got to get through is,
and then you have an insurance partner. So you had an insurance partner specifically for health and travel. Yeah. And you do that for anyone who's not in insurance. Is that because,
So
is that like the reinsurance?
this can be very confusing when you're starting out if you're not even if you're coming from within the industry, it can be very confusing
things like
because
that. So would the alternative have been
when
your
you're
own
setting up the
capital
carrier,
boost?
like
Yeah.
right now we have our own
Understood.
insurance carrier. We're developing the insurance products. We're regulated, as mentioned in Puerto Rico. We also have other entities that are regulated. We have then our kind of reinsurance partner for, and there are, okay. So those are some of the main, and there's also a few other vendors like TPA. That's the people who process claims. Often needs its own separate license, hence why we're still using that. But we and maybe also kind of in our case, global assistance. There's some other things. Now also AI claims fraud detect. But when what you want as a founder is just to have a product that gets to market. That's what you're looking for. And one way, like the way of like setting up the carrier is setting up a carrier is going to take you, even if you know what you're doing, like 1 to 2 years, and is incredibly difficult, even in the easiest jurisdictions. So, and it is capital intensive. So it's like you're really giving yourself a hard task if you're starting with that. So what's much more wiser is that you find a partner who have the licenses to make the products that you want to make. You find the product that is the closest. You see how far you can pull that to see if you can get close enough to the user experience you want, and then you can go live, and then you can have an exponential growth on that product. And then in parallel, you can set up carriers, which we did. And you can even sort of move out one thing at a time, because there's also several of these responsibilities which are large and take some operational lift to do. So why do everything all at once? But yeah, there are the regulatory is one reason, and you mentioned the other one is capital. It is true that you certainly, to get like the carrier license, you actually do need sort of a reinsurer essentially. And that becomes another kind of gateway. So what's it called? Not gateway, but the opposite of a gateway, gatekeeper. However, I should say they are a lovely gatekeeper compared to the insurance companies, which are typically not a lovely gatekeeper. When I discovered that whole industry, I was like, this is amazing. Like, these guys are all so great. And this would be very reinsurance. And it's so much money, and there just seems to be having such a good time. It seems like such a great thing for a startup to do, actually. Yeah. Very sort of.
What was that, the industry?
Well. I think you could totally build, and I know some are now, and I have a friend, Karn, was doing one called Rare. But yeah, so anyway, they're a gatekeeper, but they're a pretty congenial gatekeeper. But yeah. Well, that's usually the one who are on the hook, right? They have consumer
interesting.
facing
So
high
the
regulated
reinsurance
product.
industry is
Reinsurance is
innovative,
not very
very
regulated
open.
at all,
Insurance industry,
even in
like
the
the
US.
customers of reinsurance is like
So,
that.
and they're flexible and they're smart. it's just everything is good about it. I have only positive experiences with reinsurance. But almost the opposite with that. Not fully the opposite, but yeah, the other, of course, thing we're facing is that the norms in the industry are so far apart from kind of Silicon Valley tech product norms for user experience. It's like it's very different.
Yeah. And how does it then work with being plugged in kind of to a network of healthcare providers, right? Because the insured person like needs to make a
Right.
claim, right, when they get
So
somewhere. How
this you get through
build your
the
network where you're
TPA,
covered?
which is
Is
such
it covered
a
through the
unnecessary
insurance
shortening because it
partner,
just
or
stands for
once you're a
third party
carrier, do you need to build
administrator,
your own
which
network?
doesn't like, what does that even mean? But you get that through the TPA, the claims handler. So the claims handler they need this operationally as they're processing claims. So they will often have like their own, or they'll buy that, and that's part of their kind of operation. But in terms of how you do this, there's no great international network like you have in certain countries. The US network is kind of off the charts, higher coverage and quality than anywhere else. But there are some countries that have like kind of half of what the US does. Portugal, Spain comes to mind. But in the US, there's a lot of bad things to say about, there's even bad things to say about networks in the US. That's because they're expensive. They know their value, and they're a big part of why, there's a part of why it's so expensive in the US. But they provide an absolutely amazing service, which causes the user experience that you essentially don't have to do claims for like 99% of times you go to the doctor, because the medical provider has to send the network the documentation. And you essentially do the claims processing point of service. It's like you go there, they have built into their little software what you're covered for, and there's like standardized codes and stuff. And then to just print it out, and you pay your whatever $35 copay. And in literally 99.5% of cases, that's everything the user does. So worldwide, this is not the case at all. Even in the countries that are good ones, the coverage is much less. It doesn't work as smoothly. Right? The highest you get is like 50 to 70%. And in most countries, you have no such network at all. Like networks are very narrow, like less than 10% of medical providers. Doesn't work like that at all. So in practice, then you got to do claims in a different way, which is that one that's like, either it's like, worst case is like pay and reimburse. But what we always try is like direct billing, right? And we have a relationship with a bunch of them, so we can try to do direct billing for all big things. Obviously, we set up direct billing. So we get notified, and then we essentially reach out to the hospital to set up direct billing. But the users still have to take pictures of some of their documents and send them in. We are working hard to kind of simplify this, though. So one thing we're just rolling out now. Did you have Nomad Complete or Essential? Do you remember the big or the small? Yeah. Okay. Oh, through your company. So you have the company one. Awesome. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Then you're going to get this by the end of the year, the latest. So we're rolling out this thing called payment cards, which is meant to address this exact problem that there isn't a kind of worldwide network in place.
Yeah.
So the payment card is essentially
Also
just like
an
a payment
ambassador, by the
card
way.
that you can then use to pay at the medical provider. And then we want to get it closer to the kind of corporate card experience, where you just pay with the card. And by the end of the year, all health insurance users will have this. So you pay with the card, take a picture of the thing, and that's it. And I think that everyone who's trying it says it's a great user experience. So I'm very happy about this. And that removes some of the need for the worldwide network. But we also have a network project that we just started called Nomad Care Finder. Right now, it's just this like, we get reviews on individual providers by our customers, and we kind of generate these profiles, like how well they speak English, the prices, and many other things that we can glean from the claims info. I love that project, but that's also the beginning of seeing if we can make a network, since no one has an international network that's as good as it is in the US.
Amazing. There's so many valuable insights for entrepreneurs, especially if they're looking to enter insurance. Like, as I mentioned, I'm getting increasingly fascinated by the space. Also having read a bit about the history of insurance, right? There's this like book Against the Gods, like how us discovering mathematics and probability allowed us to systematically manage risk, where insurance played really a key part to build kind of the rails for capitalism, making the world kind of more
Yeah,
predictable and things like that.
I
I was
love
very
starting
fascinated
an
by
insurance
that.
company. I think it's a cool.
Is there
It's
anything
cool in
else
so
that
many
you want to
ways.
give entrepreneurs on the way that want to start
There
their
are
insurance
like
business?
every
Would you
startup.
recommend it
Like
in the first
I
place to
did
do
a previous
insurance
startup,
business or insurance?
Superside, which right now is like 800 employee kind of design freelancer platform, and that startup had its thing that was bad about it, and this one has different things. And I feel like every startup has like one thing that's like bad about that industry or something. And so you got to pick your poison. With that one, it was like operational intensity. Like there was always some project melting down. Uh, Insurance is so calm relative to that, operationally speaking. The difficulty here is the regulation part. That's what's hard, and achieving the level of user experience and iteration speed that you want with that strength or kind of challenge. No, I would definitely recommend it. What else to say about insurance? I mean, yeah, like you said, I think it is definitely a fascinating thing to do insurance. So you have, this idea that something bad will happen, you don't know to whom, and then we can kind of pool it, and then we make this kind of shared community rules, right? Which is what an insurance policy is like. This happens, provided XYZ, then the group will pay it to that person, up to a limit. And that's each line of an insurance policy. And what that does is that it removes that risk from everyone. It makes it into kind of from this like unmanageable disaster into like a very manageable subscription chunk. Um, I mean, it's phenomenal. And that of course frees you up from having to deal with and prevent those disasters uh, with as much effort, which you can then spend, on the highest, most valuable alternative use of your time. So I think it is a great thing. It is one of those like real kind of human, what is it called, hive mind technologies, where we kind of make use of technology to kind of make leverage the fact that we have language and this coordination among many to kind of become a higher form of being. Um, so I think it is absolutely great. Of course, they have some problems with it. Those are often they're well known. Not all bad things that can happen, risks, are completely independent, right? They're not all gamma ray bursts or something. Like it's a lot of them are like this, like there's an element of chance, but you can also affect them a little bit, right? That's a lot of insured risk. So, and then you have asymmetric, information, and you have a moral hazard. Asymmetric information is either buy or no. I am more likely to get this bad thing to happen to me. And therefore I'm buying the insurance. So it's like the population you get is skewed. Moral hazard is I'm covered for this, therefore I don't do the reasonable effort to avoid this bad thing from happening, and therefore the risk goes up. And then your price goes up and you get into the spiral. So yeah, but I think you can solve these problems strategically. But I've seen many people mess them up, even in startup land. The way you mess them up is that you find it's like you find some niche and you're like, oh my gosh, like they don't have insurance, but it's because they have this higher, like, it's like, oh my gosh, like all of these extreme sports, it is literally a true story. Someone told me that they did. these extreme sports skiers don't have travel insurance. I'm going to make travel insurance and sell it to these extreme sports skiers. What a great deal. Yeah, and you can just kind of fill in the rest of that story. Actually, maybe you can't. They are much higher risk, and so and then they go bankrupt, the insurance company. So that is, in our case, right? What you want is product differentiation, according to kind of some non-risk metrics. So we have our companies. Okay. Here's our. Actually, this is a really important thing. If someone is actually want to start an insurance company, I got to tell you this. The insurance company has gone through sort of 3 generations, similar to lending. And it was like, first, people just put lending products and put them online in the form of either reselling websites or search engines at like mid 2000s. And then the second wave, they kind of did that, but they used software to kind of pick the good lemons out of a bad bunch. But it's only in the third wave that kind of enduring large value companies like Affirm and Klarna were created. And that's when they made differentiated lending product themselves. The products themselves are differentiated. Because in the first one, you're still just kind of, it's like that, you're just competing the margin away situation. You need to be different. You need differentiation. Insurance has gone through a similar thing, but it came about 5 years later than lending. So you have the first kind of generation of insurance startups. They were like policy genius or something. They were search engines, just put a regular kind of offline policy online. And then middle of the 2010s, you had something like Lemonade. They're on the better end of this, so it may be bad to pick on them. But you had others, Route Metro Mile, who were kind of using, like they say, but their focus is using software. They call it an underwriting advantage, which I got asked so much about. It's really annoying, but it means this. It's using software to pick good lemons out of a bad bunch. Now, all of them didn't fulfill that promise. And that is, I would say, because they're not differentiated. And I've seen this live with friends who have insurance startups. I have this one, how do I tell the stories without giving him away? Okay, I think I can do it. So I have this one friend who got a startup to like, I think it was 70 million. And then he kind of went bankrupt during COVID when they couldn't raise more. It's not COVID, but like 2022 is kind of startup bust. And I asked like, why was that? And he said, well, high loss ratios. And I said, well, why didn't you just raise the prices? And he said, if we just raised the price $1, like all our sales were from these like price comparison websites. So if we just raised our price $1, our sales goes to 0. So we have like 0 leeway in raising our prices. And that's what, like, there you have, like, that's what lack of differentiation looks like. You're just selling a standardized product that compete purely on price. And you can't raise your prices. So in our case, right, we have spent no effort trying to pick good lemons out of a bad bunch. We're all working on simplifying and, making differentiated products, but we happen to get really low loss ratios. That was completely coincidental, but it is because our customers are so healthy. And it's because digital nomads are like, they're all working on their computers. Yeah. They're all like, exactly. They're all really fit. Like, yeah, exactly. When you see like top things they do, it's like hiking, surfing, like it's that kind of thing. So they're just really healthy, but that was not our intention. So I think this is a good lesson. All our effort is, in a way, you can think of it as put into the bucket of simplification, differentiation. Okay, one other lesson there on simplification versus customization. This is a strategic question all insurance startup founders would have to make. And here, what I think is the opposite of what everyone else thinks. So, and it's not like I'm right and they're wrong. It's more like this is a trade-off, and I think we're the only one on our side of the trade-off. So I think there's like a lot of space, sort of. And that is the trade-off between customization and sort of personalization and simplicity in insurance products. So the kind of default wisdom that we were told over and over again is like, oh, this amazing thing with software AI, you can figure out so much about a person that you can guess price just like this one person. You can just tell exactly what you want. And this always kind of seemed really wrong to me. It took me like a few years into the company before I realized why I thought it was, why it felt wrong. But the initial reason we didn't do it is just because it's the opposite of simplification. So I was trying to go for this user experience where you could just like sign up the way you would to any website with like, I'll put in my email, name, address, buy, end of purchase. And that is possible to do the following way. So if you start this process, what your kind of insurance partner or whatever insider will tell you is that you can't just do that because you need that info. It's like the more the asymmetric information or moral, like if you just take that away, just sell it to everyone, you're just going to go down this road. However, what you find when you look underneath the hood is that they ask for many things. Most of the things they ask for, they don't even use. I'm telling you, every single product they ask for a lot of things they don't use for anything. The other is that of the things they do use, it's very often is like 10, 20 things. And 2-3 of them make like 97% of the difference. Okay. So instead, that's different by product. But for health, it's age.
Can you say what these are?
Age and occupation alone gets you some over 90%,
Okay.
or over 95%, I think. So, yeah. So
age or how much you exercise.
Yeah, health is remarkably driven by age alone. So what you then do is that you take those top things and you make them essentially an eligibility criteria. So you say, in order to buy this product, you need X, Y. But then, provided you have that, you don't need to provide any information. And it's just problem solved. Then you've taken out 95% of the variation. You have a simple buying process. And this totally works. But no one thought it works. Like they all think it's like kind of crazy / stupid, but it totally works. And yeah, so it's a different approach, but it has the same outcome.
Amazing. But then again, you said you do have low loss ratios because of your customer profile.
Well,
right. So do you know?
Here's the thing:
that the other things don't matter, considering that your customer profile is not that risk prone in the first place.
The customer profile thing matters most out of the gate. The thing that really gives us flexibility is the fact that we're a differentiated product. And that relates to the customer profile, right? Because we were just like, we're nomads, we're going to make product for digital nomads. That was literally what we were doing. So, and because we're going to, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As long as you can increase the prices in a way, that is really the key thing. So you don't end up in that sort of policy genius situation I explained with my friend.
One country,
because in our case,
things might like matter margins.
We have at several points changed our product and then increased our price, even for things that users actually don't even know about. Like one huge example was that when we removed the deductible copay, like at some point we removed all of that. We just made it $0. It was really because we in the future wanted to introduce cards, and we just had to remove that because otherwise that creates so much issue. That's actually increased the payouts for us a lot. And so we had to increase our prices. I think it was like 20%. It was an enormous price increase by something that people didn't understand. So if we were in that other guy's situation, increasing our price 20% just means we lose 100%. We lost nothing. You can even tell from one day to the other. We had no drop off in purchases, no churn difference. From increasing, I think for a lot of customers, it just looked like we just increased our price 20% just for lols. Like that's, but because the product is differentiated, we can increase our prices without losing 100% of our buyers. So I do think you could make a niche that is expensive as long as it's differentiated.
Yeah. So we're in Prospera, right? And insurance is very key to Prospera, right? The whole idea is that insurance becomes your regulator. So you have regulatory insurance and stuff like that. We don't yet have an insurance industry, unfortunately, right? So I'm really calling on more entrepreneurs who are interested in insurance to come here and help us build more of an insurance industry here. And I'm kind of curious, if you have ideas how Prospera could position itself as attractive insurance, like what could be a competitive advantage versus like Bermuda or some other jurisdictions? Like one thing I heard is just to make the experience more digital, right? So a lot of these jurisdictions still like very
I'll run one answer, but obviously
I the idea that to be insured for the insurance and whatever the regulatory,
but to some degree.
I
but I think the error a little bit you're doing there though is that you're sort of you're not doing the kind of primary thing. So one example is when people talk about making an investment firm, a venture firm, they will talk about helping startups, but it's actually the sort of signaling effect, deal flow thing is going to override that 10x. So like just focus on getting the signaling effect in it sorted. And there is a similar thing here with insurance. So yeah, you definitely want to be, have the good user experience, but that you're going to do that. Like you're going to be 10 or 100 times better than Puerto Rico out of the gate, almost no matter how clumsily you do this device. Like it's so easy to be better. And you should still do that. Like you should make it amazing. But it's not enough. The reason why a lot of this is kind of clustering network credibility. I think that's a big part of it. There is this insurance as an industry predates often nation states, even like Lloyd's. And so that whole industry has grown up in this world that is like much more decentralized, chaotic. And so you have a lot of these institutions like Lloyd's, but also many others that provide this like trust in this, in anarchy situation. And I think that's the thing you really got to overcome. That's why they would kind of, I think there is some network effect to this. That's the hard. So you have to sort of, if you were to do it, I would answer that kind of why is the application question, like how do we overcome the chicken and egg problem of the network effect of the insurance company regulation, and then how to kind of give this like seeming kind of perception of credibility, which I think a lot of it can be just this perception. But here's a third very practical thing. Just look at insurance startups that are registered, not live yet, and send them an email because they're not able to launch their products currently. So just send them a message and also live with an insurance partner because they're often looking to go independent because they can't do what they want with their product. So you can say, set up here.
Registered, but not live yet.
And then, just speed. I mean, it's so slow and it's slower even than it's advertised to set up this carrier thing. But I don't know why it's so slow. It just seems so unnecessary. I mean, in the end, we're just sending one endlessly long application and that they then approve. Like I don't know why it needs to take 2 years. I don't think it needs to. I think it could take a weekend if you really, yeah.
Yeah. Endlessly fascinating conversation. There's so many more questions, but we're also starting to near the end of our time. So let's take the rest of the time, your ideas and thoughts on the ideas around or what you're seeing in the whole
Yeah.
network state space. Right? So you have
We do.
a
So we,
network
I mean,
state
we
online
want, I
community
think we
called
will
Lumia.
start
Right.
what might
So
possibly
what's the thought
be
process
the
there, or
first
what are your ideas or thoughts around the network state?
later recognized as internet country. We will do that now with Nomad Citizen. We have the kind of social safety net coming up. We'll add to that. That will be a part of it, the first kind of step towards the citizenship part, which currently our plan is to build on top of our incredible success with Nomad visas to make sort of Schengen for countries with Nomad visas. And then notification on top of that, so you have a passport. And that's better than a passport because it's a passport that gives you residency in 80 plus countries. So that's our current plan. And the role we have in that ecosystem is, we appear quite different than a lot of people. Like if you go to a network state conference, it has that kind of vibe that any very early stage, but clearly happening thing has. Like if you went to an Ethereum meetup when I first came to SF 2015, I went to these Ethereum meetups and I'm like, that's the same guys. Like it's sometimes literally the same guys. So there is just this kind of personality who's just like willing to go with, there's a very, 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 just the tip of the spear of early adopter. So that's what you meet. Network state as a community is also very focused on physical, right? It's the central idea is really the physical, like you have the online community going by a physical location. Well, we are in a way not doing that. We are providing the digital infrastructure for such communities. So in some sense, it's we're more like providing infrastructure for future network states. So that's one angle. I certainly think I find it fascinating because we put this. This was our vision from day one. Like it was to make a global social safety net for the first country on the internet. And it still feels early, that second part of that, our vision statement, like to this day. But less early, like for a few years, it was like, has anyone else thought about this? Like was a bit our feeling. No, that's not the case. No, it's more like, oh, we are this like oddly mature child in a very kind of lively community. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of how it that feels now. We also have a different, I would say, relationship
The
with
oddly mature
countries.
child in this very
While
nascent
because
embryonic
of
space.
the influence of
Crazy
mythology
frontier
and
space.
his embrace of pragmatism, I think many people would claim that they're pragmatists in that community. But my feeling is that a lot of them are more doctrinaire libertarians, which I definitely have a lot of sympathy with. But I think we are in practice more pragmatic in our relationship with countries, and that gives us a great advantage, right? So when we aired the idea at Web Summit of the Nomad visas, and then, which was perfect timing, 2019, spring 2020, this one person who heard it, went back, COVID happened, sent a letter to the government to save their tourist-dependent economy. This idea of Nomad visas, they implemented it in 2 months. And now 80 countries that copied it. We've been at the UN to speak about this twice. We had this conference in Morocco for policy makers, etc. And it's just really embraced. And I think we really also did a strategic move there where we tipped a lot of countries into this mindset of trying to succeed instead of fear, right? And it could have gone either way. So I think our attitude there, it shines and allows us to have a very friendly relationship with sort of landholding countries, which is another kind of role we're playing in this ecosystem of people who kind of, at least on the surface, appear much more hostile, while we appear very friendly. Those are some reflections.
Amazing. Again, would love to continue. Hope maybe sometime in Prospera at the Network State Conference in Singapore. Also, seriously thinking we're already an ambassador, but how to integrate SafetyWing more with our membership, right? So we're actually going to link to the affiliate link in our Infinita wallet pretty soon. And in the meantime, call on the listeners. We are having a program in September called BioFrontiers. Right. So for people interested in frontier jurisdictions, decentralized science, health and longevity, and all of that in biotech.
Yeah. If you're an
that's
SF in October, we are going to have
Sondre,
like
is there anything else you'd like to draw our listeners' attention to that you're doing, or how they can engage with your company?
And so definitely come by. There's going to be a lot of cool things. Some of them network state related, but also some more startup events. And so come there. Number 2, we are in the early stages. Like there's the waitlist beta, like first external users being onboard to Nomad Citizen. So if you're kind of really into that and want to be, founding Citizen among the earliest beta users, with the pros and cons, with the cons of that, definitely go to, I guess there's a waitlist you can go find on our website. Or if you have any advice for how we can make that product work, also very eager to hear that. Wonderful. Thanks, Niklas.
Amazing. Sondre, thanks so much for coming on the show. Super fascinating conversation, and hope to see you soon in the various places where we frequent.